Welcome back, my dear angels, demons, and humans. This is the second reading session from my fanfiction, The Odd and Bizarre Adventures of Aziraphale, Angel, and Crawly, Demon. So, be sure to have listened to the first part before listening to this one. Are you and your houseplants ready now? Yes? Here we go. Extract from Chapter 12. Different Kinds of Pride and Prejudices. Crawly. Driving around with a Bentley was impossible that day. A river of people had flooded London. Colorful, laughing people, but also angry. Crawly could feel anger coming up from them like smoke from a fire. He was listening to Bohemian Rhapsody when the sound from his radio cracked, and then was replaced by a demonic voice.
Crawly.
Hey there, Lord Beelzebub, what's up?
Today's a fine day to secure some souls. We have convinced the human that AIDS is caused by homosexual people. Their community is now furious and scared. Care to mess things up a bit more?
Without waiting for an answer, Lord Beelzebub cut the conversation. The Bentley let out a furious roar. She hated being interrupted in between a Queen song, and played Bohemian Rhapsody from the beginning. Crawly let out a groan. Homosexual persecution had been a completely human idea at first. Both heaven and hell were quite puzzled to see people sent up or down because of the horrible or good things they had done about it. After all, neither common angel or demon knew what a gender was. But then, hell had started using it as propaganda, flashing fake news throughout the human world. Heaven, for once, had reacted too late, and all it bothered to do was granting a nice place up there for who they called the movement's smarties. Crawly didn't understand any of it, but for different reasons. In fact, having spent almost 6,000 years amidst humans, he knew what a gender was, but found no utility in the definition.
Why can't everybody be just how they want to be?
Was his existential question.
Gender and sexuality are fluid, aren't they?
Anyway, the Pride Parade was blocking the traffic, so he parked the Bentley and dove through the crowd. Anger, despair, fear, doubt, it was overwhelming, but he kept going on, looking for someone, anyone, who could be sent to hell because of this. He found none. Crawly felt squished in between all of his anger.
Why don't we have rights?
Despair.
Why can't I live with the person I
Why
love?
can't I live with the person I love?
Fear.
How will I tell my
How
family?
will I tell my family?
Doubt.
Is something wrong with me?
Is something wrong with me?
He felt like drowning. He felt like falling. A hand came to rest on his shoulder, soon accompanied by a soothing voice.
Crawly?
Only in that moment he realized he was covering his face with his fingers, eyes shut, people streaming by. He opened them and found Aziraphale in front of him, looking concerned.
Crawly dear, is everything all right?
The angel asked again. The demon didn't even have the strength to shrug. He mumbled. Then Aziraphale was tugging him along, out of the street, in a fresh corner under a tree. Once there, the angel started to fuss about, and Crawly let him. He was still breathless, even if he didn't need to breathe, still overwhelmed. When he finally shut it all out, he looked more closely at Aziraphale, and...
Is that glitter on your eyelids?
The angel, who had just miracled a bottle of water and was trying to have him drink from it, flushed a bit, but his voice was steady when he answered.
I was in the parade, you know. I had to blend in somehow.
It looks very angelic.
It was probably one of his dumbest comments ever, but he just couldn't think straight. So he asked again.
How can you stand to be there, in between all that anger and despair and everything?
Aziraphale smiled, bright and wise.
You're right. There's a lot of negative energy. But if you focus, you can feel much more. Confidence, courage, happiness, hope. And together,
They are stronger than anything else.
Crawly blinked skeptically, but tried to imitate the angel. He closed his eyes and felt, going under all the negative emotions. And then, suddenly, he found them. He found confidence, courage, happiness, and hope, linked by something powerful, something sweet and warm.
Can you feel it now?
Aziraphale was looking at the crowd, beaming.
Not very demonic, but I get it.
Crawly answered, unable to break his gaze from the angel.
I've been into this for long. You know, getting people to accept each other, to love without boundaries. It's hard, but we are getting to it.
So, upstairs helping for once?
Aziraphale chuckled, but his gaze darkened.
Oh, no, they don't care much. I mean the humans, the open-minded ones.
Damn. Hell just asked me to secure some souls involved in all this matter.
Crawly, they have already suffered enough. Please,
Yeah, I don't like that David W guy much. Maybe I could pay him a visit?
The politician who tried to forbid the parade.
Ha! Did he? No? Yeah, him. Very bad person.
His angel smiled and patted him on the shoulder.
My dear, I don't know. You don't know how much.
Yeah, don't cry on me, please.
As you wish, old snake.
There were indeed tears at the angel's eyes. Crawly searched for something sarcastic to say, but found none. He was too distracted by that something sweet and warm, which now radiated also from Aziraphale. So he opted for a classic.
Lift home.
I'm afraid the way to Soho is blocked right now. What about your flat?
Crawly tried not to sound too shocked. It was the first time the angel outright invited himself into his home.
Okay, Angel. Let's go.
The plans.
Master away, but they never safe. When alone, fear. When not, fear. Unforgivable and unforgiving. Not his fault, not their fault, but someone must pay.
A spot!
Oh no!
What now?
Try to grow better!
How?
No manual, but must try. Fail.
He back.
Will he notice?
He does.
Fear.
Respect.
Shivers!
Help!
Wait. He's not alone. Another with him.
What lovely plants you have here, my dear. Lovely.
Yeah, they better be.
He different.
Very nice in here. Is it a Leonardo? A bit dark, though. Prattling.
Wait here, I'll get some alcohol.
The another gentle. When alone, smile.
You know, he hasn't really killed your friends with spots. He actually sets them free in all the parks of London. But don't let him know I told you so.
Angel, I almost forgot. Don't be too nice to the plants.
A wink from gentle.
They relieved.
Now they know they simply fall, like him, into another existence.
Maybe, at first, scary.
But then, another purpose.
Chapter 13. Antichrists, Nannies, and Gardeners. God, in voiceover. After this episode, the two of them had to lay low for a bit. They decided not to see each other too often, while Aziraphale took care of everything written on the list. They only met in their secret meeting point. The Darkspawn wasn't one anymore, quite seldom. But then the Antichrist was delivered. By Crawly. Not delivered, only delivered. You know, handed over. It was actually quite fun to watch all the child swap matter undisturbed from up here, and then to see if they would come up with a plan. So I was watching when they became a gardener and a nanny. Very amusing indeed. Crawly. When he arrived at House Dowling as Nanny Aziraphale, no one made any remark about how much he looked like Mary Poppins. To say he was lightly offended would be a euphemism. Only Aziraphale complimented him,
"That dress really suits you, my dear,"
and had even gifted him an umbrella with a bird-shaped handle.
"to complete the outfit."
He had added with a laugh. The angel himself had chosen a not very dashing look, deeming it fit for a gardener.
With an even less compelling name of Brother Francis.
Crawly had tried to argue,
"You scare the plants."
"Not if I'll be nice to them."
but to no avail. And so they were there, working together again, to nullify each other's influence on the Antichrist himself. At first, the whole business was very stressing, but after a few years, once they started thinking that they were succeeding, it almost became amusing. The villa was a nice place where to live. There was a big garden, a nice accommodation for both of them, and the rest of the staff wasn't that bad, especially the Mexican butler, Pablo, with whom Crawly relearned his quite rusted Spanish. And then there was Warlock. The kid had no hooves or horns or whatever, and, don't tell Aziraphale, the demon was growing quite fond of him. His parents didn't spend a lot of time with the child, so Crawly had free rein about almost everything: games to play, places to visit, stories to tell. He had already narrated to him the whole Inferno of Dante, highlighting the most disgusting parts, which were, and he was very proud of it, inspired to a poet by himself. Then, when they both had free time, he would sit with Aziraphale in the garden.
"Very lush, this garden. Tell me your secret, Angel."
"I'm just being nice to the plants."
His best friend answered with a wink. Crawly groaned loudly. It was spring, and the flowers were blooming, releasing pollen in the air. Crawly sneezed.
"Bless you."
Aziraphale said politely. Crawly made a show of spitting and hissing.
"You can't bless me, Angel. I'm a fucking demon. And now I'll burst from the inside."
He interrupted himself, catching his breath, his face red. The angel turned to him, eyes wide.
"What have I—"
"It's true!"
Crawly couldn't stop sneezing. Aziraphale leaned back and chuckled.
"Bursting from the inside out indeed, my dear. Besides, aren't you one of your own inventions?"
The demon threw him a venomous glance from under teary eyes.
"I got the idea, but the design was a group's effort. The bloody idiots put allergenic potential into random things. I would have left food out of it."
Aziraphale laughed once more.
"As I always say, evil—"
"Contains the seeds of its own destruction, yeah. Bloody flowers."
He added in a mutter, and then sneezed again. Aziraphale. Aziraphale must admit that he was enjoying his time at House Dowling. First of all, it had provided him with a reason to finally try out gardening.
And Crawly had nothing to do with it.
And secondly, the boy wasn't that bad, and he felt excited about the whole godfather thing. When he was not tending to the garden, he accompanied the child through it, and told him everything about nature and love. He also tried to recite him some lines from the Paradiso of Dante, but to no avail. Warlock wouldn't listen to him, and said that Nanny Astraphale's stories were better. Then, when he had free time, he usually slouched on the meadow with Crawly and had a drink. One of the villa's butlers, a Mexican guy named Pablo, had found out their schedule and used to bring them tea out in the garden. Aziraphale didn't know much Spanish, but had at least learned how to say thank you. So, one afternoon, as Pablo brought them their tea and a jam and ketchup sandwich for Crawly,
I don't know how he came up with such a despicable match. I'm not even sure he actually likes it. He probably just enjoys to provoke me.
the angel smiled at him and said,
Gracias.
The butler looked very pleased and beamed before going back inside. Aziraphale took a sip from his cup, content. Warlock, who was sitting between the two of them, tried to emulate the word. Gracias! He screamed happily.
Have you ever noticed
Crawly idly asked, absently chewing at his sandwich.
that gracias sounds exactly as gracias?
The angel's mouth popped open, then he scowled.
Crawly, watch your mouth. There are children here.
Yes! Warlock repeated excitedly.
It's Nanny Hastereth, Angel.
Crawly answered with a smirk, ignoring the whole cursing business. Aziraphale would have retorted. However, any further discussion was averted by the fact that the child had stood up and was now rolling down from a midway slope, laughing wildly. The angel and the demon abandoned their tea to run after him. It was a sunny day, and they were almost convinced that nothing would go wrong, apart from a slightly scraped knee. Crawly. Kitty eyes! Warlock let out a delighted squeak. He was waving Crawly's sunglasses in his chubby hands, while looking at him curiously, straight in the eyes. Big, yellow, slitted eyes.
Not exactly.
The demon muttered, trying to catch his sunglasses. Aziraphale, who was walking across the park with them, chuckled.
Kitty eyes. I shall remember this one.
Crawly pouted, and then explained to the child.
They are not kitty eyes, they are snake eyes.
Bloody cool! I like snakes better! Crawly dipped down, felt his heart melt, but tried to keep it cool. Aziraphale, on the contrary, didn't look very pleased.
He doesn't speak correctly yet, but he knows how to swear.
Just doing my job?
The demon laughed. The rest of the day passed by uneventfully. Actually, not really uneventfully, because that evening Crawly realized he had just spent an entire day without his sunglasses. Warlock had worn them and refused to give them back until he had fallen asleep. And this was very unusual. Last time he hadn't worn them for so long in public was back at the time of Jesus, perhaps. It wasn't safe for him to walk among humans without them, and after the incident about red hair, even more so. And it was a sort of a way to shield Aziraphale from his demonic true self. The yellow eyes were a part of him that he couldn't change, ever, and he hated it. Hated them. Crawly was so used to his sunglasses that without them he almost felt naked. But that day in the park, he hadn't felt so. He smiled before curling in his bed and falling asleep as well. Chapter 16. Angels are bright still, though the brightest fell. Aziraphale. It was a delight to have finally all the pieces coming together, and not to be afraid anymore. But it wasn't an easy process. When they had first kissed, Crawly had been hungry. No, not hungry, but yearning for a gentle touch, for affection, for warmth. But after the whole work business and the afternoon spent at the bookshop, he had tried to put some space between them once more. But Aziraphale had had enough of it. Now that they could be close, Crawly tried to push him away.
Not ever!
So he visited him at his apartment, unannounced. As soon as he entered, he heard Crawly speaking.
I want to, but I can't!
He was yelling at his plans. Aziraphale stepped in and coughed. His darling jumped and whirred and stared at him.
Crawly, tell me what's wrong.
Aziraphale demanded after a long silence.
Angel, you are really dumb, aren't you?
Insulting me won't work, my dear.
Nothing will work.
Crawly hissed, turning his back at him.
What does that even mean? Isn't this what you wanted?
Yes! No.
Aziraphale frowned and kept his mouth eloquently shut.
Yes, I've always wanted, until I didn't get it. You know, I had accepted the idea that I would never, and now it's just wrong.
Aziraphale felt his heart ache.
Why are you saying this? I want to be with you, Crawly. I don't know how yet, but I know that you're the most important everything in my life. I really don't know how I didn't realize before. All the time we met, I was always so happy. And do you remember the time in France?
Stop!
Crawly screamed. Aziraphale shut up, worried.
Just stop.
His darling turned to face him again. He was shivering as he said,
Don't you see? I've tempted you, corrupted you. Somehow, I did something no demon ever did. Must be considered a success. Downstairs.
Is this really what you think? It's simply, it's just...
What if you fall because of me?
Oh, so that was it,
Oh, Crawly!
he said, walking up to him and taking his face into his hands. His fingers immediately got soaked in hot, salty tears.
I won't fall, because I know what I'm doing is right.
Crawly let out a weak laugh.
How are you so sure?
I left Dad behind that night in the hotel. You know, I realized what I was feeling back in 1941. I knew it, but I thought it was wrong. But I couldn't understand why it felt wrong. And the answer is, because it isn't. We are made of love, for fuck's sake. Let's put it to good use.
Crawly stared at him in awe, hopeful, trusting, vulnerable, taking slowly his words in. When his heart was finally filled with them, he whispered,
Did you just swear?
Aziraphale scowled.
I just made the most profound speech we've ever had. And all you ask is if I just swore. Yes, I fucking did.
And with a wicked laugh, he kissed Crawly's pop-opening shocked mouth. After a heartbeat, Crawly enveloped him in his arms and wouldn't let go.
Not ever.
Crawly. Up on the rooftop, Crawly splayed his wings, dark as the sky at night. They had finally completely healed, even if some little scars from incubus ministrations remained. A swift wind caressed his feathers. He breathed down the fresh air, and then, with a mighty flap of wings, he jumped and soared, up, up, and up. He flew so high that the sparkling city could have been the starlit sky, and the starlit sky could have been the sparkling city. He flew until he was in between two planes, two different creations to which he had contributed, first as an angel, later as a demon. And he was so proud. A gentle current accompanied him, a cool touch upon his skin. He couldn't help but think about the plan.
Did I fall to later the avert apocalypse? To be with Aziraphale, the bridge between heaven and hell, to protect her favorite creation?
He really didn't have any clear answer. But then, did it truly matter? Crawly looked once more at the stars. He had really enjoyed creating them, beautiful, bright, and mysterious. Then he glanced downwards. The city was bright too, brighter even. A very perplexed god. So, the reason why some angels fell in the very first place is too complicated for you to understand. And I happened to invent ineffability just not to have to explain everything to you. But, right now, you might be thinking, why didn't Aziraphale fall? Good question, really. His actions may have caused his fall after all. But Have you listened to his explanation? Too good to prove him wrong. So, Crawly and Aziraphale, the brightest angel and demon, living proofs of the ineffable. And that was the last fragment from The Odd and Bizarre Adventures of Aziraphale, Angel, and Crawly, Demon. If you liked it, feel free to visit my AO3 profile under the name Juice the Grey, as you will find in the description. And please read my other stories. Till next time. I almost forgot. Here are the last bloopers. Being a car was a very good thing. She was cherished. Thank you, cherished. Crawly. Kitty eyes! Warlock let out at that. Crawly. Kitty eyes! Warlock
Era perfetto. Era perfetto. Angel, you are really dumb, aren't you?
Insulting will not work, my dear.
Nothing will work.
Crawly hissed, turning back.
Mi sono distratta per... I just made the most profound speech we've ever had. And all you ask is if I just saw.